On the debut episode of Top of the List, we talk through the works of Quentin Tarantino, ranking his films from worst to first. Stay tuned to find out what's on top of the list.
All right, awesome. So, as you can tell, this is a brand new show starring me, Dominic Gonzalez, and one of my best friends, if not my best friend in the entire world, Ryan Barnett. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing great, Dom. Excited to be a part of this show. Welcome, folks, out there to Top of the List.
And Ryan's also a huge Quentin Tarantino fan. Is that right, Ryan?
That is correct, Dom, as I know you are as well. In fact, a lot of our friendship built around the films of Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, that's right. Our friendship pretty much started because we both love Pulp Fiction, right?
Absolutely, one of the best films, and don't want to spoil our list a little bit too much in advance, but we will be talking about Pulp Fiction, one of Tarantino's masterpieces. Of course, 9 great films to talk about, and Pulp Fiction, one of our favorites, but there are so many great films, so many great moments of cinema created by Tarantino, which is why we had to do our debut episode on the man himself, Quentin Tarantino, and his films.
Absolutely, there was no other choice when it came to what director we were going to choose, what kind of list we wanted to make. So as far as the show in general, I just want to go out and just kind of explain what our fans and audience can expect for each episode of this show. So me and Ryan, obviously, we're huge movie lovers, but I am personally a huge video game guy. Ryan isn't that much, but I am. Um, Ryan, on the other hand, is a huge sports guy, where I'm kind of just into baseball. Ryan loves every sport you could possibly think of out there. So we're gonna end up doing all kinds of lists, all kinds of different media. We're gonna be doing this in audio form. We're gonna do it in video on YouTube. It's gonna be great. But we mostly want to focus on movies, TV, because we love doing that. And maybe we'll sprinkle in some current news and just to spread the news, let people know. I know that there's a few stories I might want to mention at the end of the episode. We'll see how we're doing on time. But each week we're going to move from we're going to go by whatever we're talking about. So, for example, this week we're doing Quentin Tarantino movies. So we're going to start in the order of release from the earliest, meaning his first film ever released, all the way to the most recent one, which was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Me and Ryan went and both saw that in the theater together. So we're going to go from by release date. We're going to talk about each film. We're going to go through and analyze, discuss, and we're always going to give a score out of 10. So we might, for example, give a movie a 7, but we could also give a movie a 7.5. So Ryan, I know that before the show we were kind of discussing the ranking system. I think we needed to kind of give out what adjectives go along with each rating. So, for example, let's start at the top. I mean, it is top of the list, by the way. So 10. What's the adjective for 10 out of 10?
10, I would say, an absolute masterpiece of a film. This is going to be a film that you can watch again and again, over and over, and it's still one of the best films all time. And we're not just talking about on our list. If you're a 10, you are one of the best works of cinema.
Yes, absolutely. Could not agree more. You want to keep running down that list, Ryan?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, after 10, of course, we go 9. 9, you've got a fantastic film. We're going to use the word amazing to describe 9. Maybe not one of the greatest films ever released, but still an all-time classic, something that we find a guilty pleasure that we can watch over and over again and stays just as great. Yeah, coming up next at 8, we've got great films. Now, these are films that we would watch again from time to time. Very enjoyable. Definitely worth the ticket, worth a watch if you haven't seen it yet. Why we make it slightly below a 9. This is a movie that you may watch a few times, but maybe not go back to the well and watch it over and over again like you would with a 9 or 10. But still a great film. Definitely worth a second or third watch if it comes in on TV or you're looking for something and it's on one of your streaming services.
7, the adjective we have for that is good. So, as far as I'm concerned, Ryan, you can tell me if you agree on this. I think a 7 is a completely enjoyable experience. It's a great movie. It's well worth the ticket entry price if you go to the theater and see it. It's well worth the hour, 2 hours that you spend watching it on your streaming service, on your TV. It's completely enjoyable experience.
A key with the good films and pretty much anything below an 8. These are films that, yes, may be worth the admissions price, but may not be the film that you'd want to go out and buy on Blu-ray, that you'd make a point to watch on TV. Once again, these are films that if you come in on TV, they're on and you're halfway through, you can still throw it on and enjoy the film, definitely, but maybe not a movie that you make the time out to watch a second, third, fourth time like you would with an 8, 9, or 10.
Absolutely. And then from there, we go to six. Um, for me and Ryan, six is an okay film. It's maybe just slightly above average. There was maybe one redeeming factor that really we would like to say is that this, you know what, this stands out in this movie. That's what makes it above average.
So 5, I would definitely say, is an average or moderate film. These are the films that we may not have seen in theaters, may have not struck our interest, but we've come across the film one way or another. Late night, we've all been looking through Netflix, looking through our other streaming services, come across a film, saying, well, we're looking for something to watch. We turn it on, you sit down, you watch it. It's enjoyable. You have issues with the film. There may be a problem with the plot line, maybe not the greatest dialogue or acting, but just something that is truly an average film. Nothing to write home about, but definitely a film that you still wouldn't say is terrible, that you can just sit down, watch it, and say, okay, that wasn't a complete waste of my time. Following an average or moderate film, we have a bad film, 4, a terrible film, 3, a snooze film, 2, or an embarrassment to cinema, 1. Now, typically, these shows that we're creating are going to be of directors or genres we're big fans of, so you're not going to see all too many films below the rating of a 5. Typically, these films are films that we come out of the theater or come out watching after watching very much disgruntled with something about the film, and it's really how much we disliked the film that would create the rating. I think, with a bad film, which would be a 4 rating, there's still some redeeming qualities, but there are too many flaws to overlook to give it a score above a 4. Whereas a film like a 1, an embarrassment, is something that almost you would have wished you had fallen asleep in the theater, or maybe you even did, rather than actually going to see it. Once again, this show is really focused on genres we are fans of, so I don't think you'll see all too many ratings below a 5 here, but just so you folks know out there at home how we are approaching our evaluation of films.
Yeah, anything below a 5, I think you said it perfectly, Ryan. Our disappointments outweigh anything we found advantageous about the film. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers our grading scale. And we want to go by each movie. We're going to make sure to always rate them out of 10. We'll be really vigilant about that. And then, so I think now, what do you say we move on into our Quentin Tarantino list? I'm really excited right now.
I am too. Let's dive right on in, Dom.
All right. Okay. So let's start earliest release Quentin Tarantino's debut film. And what a debut film it is. Reservoir Dogs. Ryan, take us off.
Truly, truly a fantastic way to begin your directorial career for Quentin Tarantino. Bravo, bravo, bravo. This film, off the bat, if you're not going to call it a home run, it's a triple, and your third base coach definitely held you up, but you could have rounded and headed home. Great film. Between the acting, there's some awesome standout performances in this film. You want to talk a little bit more about your thoughts on this film, Dom? I think this one, between the dialogue, the acting, and then cutting it overall with the soundtrack as well in this film. This one for me, right off the bat, is a 9 out of 10 for Tarantino.
Yeah, you know what, Ryan? I absolutely could not agree more. Reservoir Dogs is also a 9 out of 10 for me. We are in complete agreement there. Um, wow. I mean, you mentioned the score. Think about that scene, man, where Michael Madsen, I'm pretty sure, is it Michael Madsen? Yes.
It is Michael Madsen. That is correct.
I mean, cutting off that guy's ear to the tune of that song. I mean,
Stuck in the
can't,
middle with you.
stuck in the middle with you, man. Can't hear that song and not imagine that scene afterwards, right? I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
I think it's one of the most unique scenes I've ever seen. Soundtrack, other than that, also incredible. I want to talk about a few of the performances in this movie. Uh, Not having character names except for the color, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Pink. I think that that is a great way to set up your actors to have this kind of hidden layer beneath them and give them all these different layers to their performances. I think that's one of the most attractive parts of this film. And specifically, my favorite performance in this movie, Steve Buscemi. I love the guy. I think he's an amazing actor. He is so awesome. I mean, he's great. He plays this kind of weird, he was kind of a scaredy cat, kind of a nervous guy,
Let's
and
just call it a Steve Buscemi type.
absolutely, it's his. He plays to his archetype, and I think the beginning scene tells it all when he doesn't want to tip the wait staff at at the restaurant. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of standout performances in this film. Steve Buscemi is fantastic as Mr. Pink. I'm a big fan of Michael Madsen's performance, of course, as well as the relationship you build or you see built between Harvey Keitel and Tim Roth. I mean, from that, it's not the opening scene, but after your opening credits, where you have Tim Roth bleeding out essentially in the back of Harvey Keitel's car after the sting goes wrong, or the heist goes wrong, beg your pardon. I just think, this is a great film. And I love as well the choice by Tarantino to not really introduce our characters off the bat. I mean, you open up in this film with the diner scene. If I recall correctly, in fact, you don't even have uh, screen or face shots of the faces of the actors at the beginning. You zoom out and eventually see all actors' faces, but you begin with that conversation about Like a Virgin, the Madonna song, and what that song's about. And I really think this is the beauty of Tarantino's films altogether. And you see it in film number one, how he essentially doesn't introduce his characters to you. He allows the viewer to sort of be along for the ride and slowly peel back each character layer by layer until you have the big reveal at the end who Tim Roth's character actually is. And that's just a mind-blowing moment, because you
Yeah,
see and you continue to learn about all these characters until the very climax of the film, or the very end of the film, where you have that climax moment where you realize who everyone is and what their role has been in this entire story.
yeah. Before we move too much into the climax, I want to stick at the beginning. So one of the, I know that maybe you don't pay attention to the technical aspects as much as I do. Um, there's a lot of close-ups in this movie, especially when they're talking about Madonna's Like a Virgin. I think that adds to one of the probably the most defining characteristic, besides the music and other things we've talked about, is very little action in this movie, but it is one of the most suspenseful movies I have ever seen. I mean, it is from scene to scene going by. I mean, the dialogue draws you in. You want to hear what these guys are saying, even though they're just talking about a song played on the radio or not tipping the wait staff. It is some of the most intense stuff you've ever heard. I mean, it's incredible. I absolutely love the dialogue in all the Tarantino movies. That's definitely his strong point. One of his best characteristics as a writer. um, let's see, where else can we go to from here? Um, the twist, like we were kind of getting into, the twist is pretty incredible. I did not. I don't know if you saw it coming, Ryan, when you first
Not at
saw it.
all.
Okay, yeah, me, I didn't see it coming. I was completely surprised. One of the reasons why this is a 9 out of 10 for me is excellent delivery on the twist part. Um, other than that, I'm drawing a blank on anything else I could say here. Do you have anything else to add, Ryan?
I do not. Just simply, this was a fantastic debut by Tarantino, and it really set the tone, I would say, for his career. And I mean, his still career ongoing. But this was a fantastic film. This definitely was a, here I am world. I'm Quentin Tarantino, and this is what my films are going to be like. And the only thing I envy is I wish I could have been there, for or in the theaters to see a film like this when it came out. I did not have the ability to watch all these films in the order that they came out, and that's the only thing I wish I could have done, is seen this movie not knowing who Quentin Tarantino was and just having my socks blown off, because it is a fantastic film. For those of you who haven't watched it, maybe some Tarantino fans who haven't dabbled in his earlier work, this is definitely one you got to watch, and just buckle up because it's quite a ride.
Absolutely. And I actually, before we move on, I think we want to mention, why is this not a 10 or a 9.5? For me, I'm going to start off. For me, this movie is not a 10 is because as far as the general viewer, like you said, we weren't able to see it in theaters. We don't know how audiences reacted. Obviously, it's a critical success. Um, Based on the Rotten Tomato score and all that other stuff. But I mean, we weren't in the theater to see how our theater specifically reacted to different things. I know you and me watched this one together, and we were playing off each other's reactions. We were having a ball watching this movie. But that's just you and me, best friends, enjoying this kind of style of movie. But I could see this movie not being a 10 for me is because it is very dialogue heavy. A lot of people do not like the dialogue heavy style of movies. Although, while I think the dialogue is so awesome in this movie that it just pushes it above the top, I can see some people saying there's too much dialogue, not enough action. Maybe that's why I marked it down a little bit. Is there a reason why it's not a 10 out of 10 for you, Ryan?
Actually, believe it or not, the reason this one is not a 10 out of 10 for me is more the storyline. I feel like the story in this film, when you compare it to other Tarantino films, and like I said, this is why I wish I had seen this one first, a lot of his storylines in his later films involve multiple different arcs intertwining. My one complaint with this film is that it's solely focused on this heist and the aftermath of it, and all of our characters are sort of focused on the heist. I wish we had a little bit more character development. Of course, it's a longer film. I believe it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes long.
Yep.
So don't have time to touch on everything, of course, but I would have loved to know a little bit more of the background of our characters, of Mr. Blonde, of Mr. Pink, of Mr. Orange. I know we get a lot of Tim Roth, but otherwise, I would have loved to learn a little bit more about the other characters, which is the only thing that's holding me back from giving it a 10 out of 10, as well as the fact that, you know, I think Tarantino really followed up with a masterpiece, a true masterpiece of cinema, which we're going to talk about right next.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move right on. So, Reservoir Dogs, 9 out of 10 for the both of us. And we're also going to agree on this next one, Ryan. Pulp Fiction. I'll start us off for this one. Pulp Fiction, man. I mean, it's one of the best movies ever made. Maybe top three of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, I don't know if I put it at my number one. It's definitely a number two or three all time for me. Um, this is an absolute unique film, something I had never experienced before, something that many people have tried to replicate and haven't come even close. I mean, one thing we didn't discuss that in Reservoir Dogs that Quentin Tarantino introduces is the chronological kind of disorder he introduces here. He doesn't go in chronological order. He kind of mishmashes in time, and Pulp Fiction is a masterclass in out of chronological order filmmaking. Um, Take it away, Ryan. I mean, I'll keep adding on, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I know you said it's top three for you. I can say without a doubt in my mind, this is the best film that I have ever watched. I will say it. I will watch it again
Wow.
and again, and there is nothing that could dethrone this movie for me. Or I mean, it would take a lot. I'm still an avid moviegoer, of course, with COVID going on right now. Haven't been to a theater in quite a bit, but
That has
typically
been
at the
rough,
movie
yeah.
theater at least once every other week, if not once a week. But this one holds true at number one for me. Uh, this film really just everything I had positive to say about Reservoir Dogs is also contained in Pulp Fiction. And my one complaint about Reservoir Dogs, I think Tarantino handles beautifully explaining every story or every character in the story. I mean, between Vincent and Jules, your two hitmen, and then you've got your boxer, you've got that whole storyline there, and then you've got on top of it, you've got the whole diner scene that you open up with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, and we open up with that scene, and then we cut away to Vincent and Jules, and we're trying to put together where does this all go together and how it comes together in the end. Just completely bravo, beautiful work by Tarantino yet again. To me, like I said, if you're calling a deep triple off the bat for Reservoir Dogs, we're going home run out of the park here for Tarantino. Not just one of the best films he's ever made, but one of the best films all time. Like I said, I put it at number one. I know many film critics have put it in the top 25 films of all time, and they're not wrong.
Absolutely, man. Um, Yeah, this is a home run. This is a 10 out of 10 for both of us. If we haven't said it yet, 10 out of 10, masterpiece. Another thing about this that Reservoir Dogs did not do for me was the production value. You could tell Reservoir Dogs was made mostly in one location, made at a restaurant for the opening scene. Like, obviously, that's kind of easy to get done. He didn't have that much money to make that movie. He used a lot of fake blood in that one. In this one, the cinematography is better, the costume design is better, the makeup is better. Everything about this movie is 100% doubled down on, way, way, way better. I mean, let alone the lighting in this movie, the moody lighting when Bruce Willis's character first meets. Gosh, I'm blanking on the guy's name. What's the guy's name, Ryan? The mobster guy,
When Ving Rhames' character Marcellus Wallace. That,
Marcellus
there
Wallace.
you go. We
Yeah,
should have known that. I'm very upset that we didn't know that, because I mean that's from our favorite scene in the film. At least my favorite scene in the film. Also, I
it's
mean,
the camera, man. It's the camera.
I want to put it out there about this film. I don't know if there's any film out there that has more quotable lines than Pulp Fiction.
100% agree. So many quotable lines in this movie. Um, and another thing that I think this movie does that Dogs doesn't quite go the full length it could on, like you were saying, the characters in the story for you weren't as fleshed out. This one does not only have fleshed out characters, this does not only have a fleshed out narrative, but it has one of the most metaphorical and symbolic stories I've ever seen in film. I mean, just the suitcase being kind of the MacGuffin, but it could also be kind of a symbolic plight for Jules and Vincent. And man, what do you think about the symbolism? Do you want to give any theories? What's in the suitcase, man? What do you think about Ezekiel, the whole speech that Samuel Jackson gives? Go into it, man.
Well, first of all, I'd like to bring up about Ezekiel 25:17.
Yep.
First of all, that is not a Bible quote or a Bible verse, and I
Right.
think that's something that's truly amazing about the screenwriting in this film is that is not a Bible verse. That
It's
is
completely believable too.
handwritten. But the path of the righteous man, that is a fantastic scene. You want to talk about lighting? How about the lighting behind Jules? The first time he's saying that to
Yeah.
Brad and the rest of those kids who are eating their big Kahuna burger and stole Marcellus Wallace's suitcase. I mean,
Some of the best
that lighting
editing
is
I've ever seen too there.
absolutely. But I'll tell you with the suitcase. Personally, I love the mystique behind it. I don't like going too far into what it is. I just enjoy that it's something that's very much wanted. I've read an interesting theory though about it being the soul of Marcellus Wallace,
That's
and
the one
that's
I
why.
prescribe to, yeah.
Yes, the first time I think you may have actually told me about this theory and showed it to me. But the scene where the first time we see Marcellus Wallace, we see him from behind. He has the band-aid on the back of his neck,
Yep.
and I think that is a very, very interesting theory that I definitely buy into. Otherwise, though, like I said, I'm perfectly okay with Quentin Tarantino's choice to not show us what's in the suitcase. In
And
fact, I
he'll
wrote
never
a.
say what's in the suitcase, right?
Oh, absolutely. I know he's been asked multiple times because I know any big Tarantino fan, even if they don't want to know, like myself, has looked it up. What was in the suitcase? And there, yeah, countless times, and
Yep.
it will not be revealed. And I think that's what the beauty is. It's what we can imagine it. It's the, I guess, the unattainable goal. I wrote a paper about Tarantino in college and how his uh his films very much mimic life, how you enter his films not knowing these characters. You enter life not knowing much, but you learn steadily through his films about these characters. You learn about yourself and those around you in life, culminating with typically at the film there's usually a big death scene at the end, either a death or a resignation of a character, in this case Jules at the end of the film. But I think in life, if you're looking at what that suitcase is, that could be the unattainable dream, and that's different for everyone in their life. So maybe that's what it is there, that idea of what is in the suitcase.
Man, that just speaks to how amazing this movie is. That is that you can find so much beauty in the violence. That's something we can all love about Tarantino. Some people don't agree with the violence. I personally love it. I think it adds a level of complexity to this film. I mean, sure, all these gruesome and brutal things are happening, but there's also that underlying message of kind of hope that Jules gives us at the end of this movie. And I think that's part, like, just some of the most amazing writing I've ever seen, ever. Yeah. I mean, this is a 10 out of 10. Another thing is, we've talked about a few of the other performances in the movie. Uma Thurman. I know you might not be a Uma Thurman fan, but she's awesome in this movie. Ryan, do you agree?
Yeah, she gives a very much a standout performance, and I would say her best performance in cinema. I know a lot of Tarantino fans are Kill Bill fans. I was not her biggest fan in Kill Bill,
Uh huh.
but in this film, she is fantastic as Mia Wallace, and some of the messages she brings in that film. I mean, the dialogue between her and Vincent Vega, John Travolta's character, at Jackrabbit Slim's, fantastic, and her observations on life and just the peaceful silence and being able
Yep.
to just shut the blank up,
Yep.
and
Don't be a
just
square.
enjoy the silence. And yeah, don't be a square. Exactly. I mean, even her choice on where she wants to go to dinner, I think definitely plays into the film, and her character is just such an important role to this film, and there'd be a lot left out of this film if she were not in it. And I think almost her character's mortality, it brings a new meaning to this film, watching her just about die, and almost her change. We only see her one time after she overdoses, and it's a scene at the Wallace home out by the pool. She sees Vincent Vega, and I believe she just mouths thank you to him, but you almost see that change in her from someone who is unafraid to die to someone who has had that experience and is all the wiser for it and has maybe changed as a character,
Yeah.
and you just see it in that one scene.
Yeah, yeah, just the and I what I love about that scene, I'm so glad you brought that up, is that, they just say it's just like a passing, oh, hey Vincent, something like that, but you can just feel from the way they look at each other and the way they just the subtle inclinations they give in that dialogue is so powerful. You could tell they've been through some major stuff together, and I just think that is one of the best little tiny nuances some they could add to that performance. And I mean, I think we got that part of it. Uh, let's talk about my personal favorite part of the movie. I don't know if I ever told you this, Ryan. Bruce Willis picking up that sword and slaying some dudes. What do you think about that?
That scene, I mean, I think if you're not a fan of violence, but you're watching this Quentin Tarantino film and you've got Zed and Spider, those characters, you have to have some bad people to want to watch them suffer. And you see Bruce Willis with, he's choosing out a weapon. I think he picks out a chainsaw first, but finally he sees the sword and
Yep.
chooses it, and you're almost rooting for him. And you don't want to root for a person who's about to go disembowel someone with a sword like that. But uh, that scene really makes you root for him, and you're just hoping he finds the perfect weapon. He looks at the chainsaw, you think maybe the chainsaw, but then he gets the sword, and you just know it's
Yep.
so right there that these
Y-
guys are about to get what's coming to them.
Yeah, and I'm gonna mention right now, I'm an English major. I graduated college at the University of Laverne with a bachelor's degree in English. Ryan's gonna be rolling his eyes right now, but this is something that is first introduced. I love this about Tarantino, and since I went to college, I loved him even more because of this. The whole thing where he's choosing the weapon, maybe the hammer, maybe the chainsaw, maybe the baseball bat, but no, the sword. That's straight out of Shakespeare. Shakespeare invented that kind of comedic where everyone's cheering once he picks up the katana. That is something totally Shakespearean. It enhances this movie to another level for me. It makes it art. It's absolutely art for this. That's I know it sounds silly, but that for me, that's what makes it an absolute art masterpiece. Yeah.
See, and you said I'm going to be rolling my eyes, Dom, but I love that, and I love that's what you bring to the show as an English major. Personally, I was a business major, so maybe I don't have the eye exactly for that, but a little bit of yin and yang there between the two of us.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
more practical myself, the more focused on the abstract, like Dominic, and I think that's what we bring in this show, and something that we can both enjoy Quentin Tarantino films there and analyze them and bring the best content to you guys at home.
Cool. All right. So we could talk about Pulp Fiction all day, all night long, but let's keep moving. So, Reservoir Dogs, 9 out of 10 for both of us. Pulp Fiction, 10 out of 10 for both of us. We're gonna now we're gonna move apart. We're definitely gonna totally take a huge turn here. Um, so technically, the next and third film from Quentin Tarantino is Jackie Brown. But Ryan, do you want to explain what we're doing with Jackie Brown?
Yeah, so unfortunately, neither of us have had the chance to see Jackie Brown. Not I would say not the most popular Quentin Tarantino film. We'd both love to see it. Hasn't been on as many streaming sites as the Pulp Fiction, the Reservoir Dogs. So we haven't had a chance to watch it. The few times it has appeared on streaming sites, we figured since we've seen just about every Quentin Tarantino film together, we'd wait it out, wait till we had the chance
Yep.
to watch it together and analyze it together. As Dominic mentioned, when we watched Reservoir Dogs, it was great to see how, for the first time watching it, how we could play off each other based off of the scenes we saw to analyze it. So we haven't seen Jackie Brown, so unfortunately we cannot include it in the list, but definitely a great film, I'm sure, knowing what
Yeah.
it's about, hearing the story of Jackie and as well as character played by Samuel L. Jackson, something that we plan on watching together when we get the opportunity.
Yeah, and if when and if we get the opportunity, we'll obviously at the end of a show we'll make a big note about it, and we'll say we're going to include our review for Jackie Brown now. And when that time comes, we'll let you guys know. We'll add maybe down in the comment below. We'll add a comment giving our score. But until then, we're going to move straight on to the fourth film from Quentin Tarantino, and that is Kill Bill. For me, Kill Bill is I'm gonna check my score here. I have seen it twice. I watched it once last night. That way, I could just kind of remember because it's one of the fewest the Quentin Tarantino's movies I've seen the fewest. But yeah. So for me, Kill Bill Volume One is a 7 out of 10. For me, no Quentin Tarantino movie is average. He makes above average movies. I know Ryan, you're gonna disagree with this. Maybe you do agree. I'm not quite sure where we're gonna go with this, but for me, Kill Bill Volume One, a 7 out of 10, and I'm gonna give you the reasons why. Number one, there's a few moments in this movie that take me out of the experience. Uh, Namely, the cartoon bit where it goes into this kind of anime style backstory. I think this is a big misstep by Quentin Tarantino. A huge pacing blockage right here in the smack dab in the middle of the film for me. I thought that totally cut the tension out. It's beautiful to look at, something that Quentin Tarantino never fails. He always amazes the eye. But I do think that for all the other members that of the death squad that she kills, he never gives any backstory for them besides just a few passing lines, like Bud is the brother of Bill. Um, each, I don't understand why. What's her name? Orishi
Oren Ishii.
Oren Ishii gets this whole big backstory via anime, and for me, it was a little over the top. And that's another problem I have with this movie. Whereas Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs feel like the maybe some of the dialogue that could be seen as cheesy or a little bit too over the top. I think that in those movies he manages it well. It's just the right amount of awesomeness. He makes it feel awesome, not cheesy. In this, when she sees her enemies, that weird sound plays. You know what I'm talking about, Ryan?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
For me, that took me out of the experience. The first time I heard that, I was like, what? Okay, I get what he's trying to go for. He's going for this throwback 70s vibe. But for me, it did not work. As far as the positives go, I love the action in this movie. I think it's great. Maybe a few too many close ups, maybe a few too many quick cuts, but that's part of the style. I think that it's an advantage to this movie. But let me think of some more things I had to say about this. Ryan, go ahead and say what you need to say.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of either of the Kill Bill films. Kill Bill Volume 1, I liked a little bit less than Kill Bill Volume 2. Of course, my reasoning very similar to yours. I think the whole anime scene really took me out of the film. I really like in both Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. Yes, there's some gory massacre scenes, but they are all things that could truly happen, and I think this one was a little bit over the top in that scene. That being said, my biggest redeeming factor in this film, I love the scene where Uma Thurman is there with Vernita Green, and they're in the
Yeah.
kitchen.
Yep.
honestly one of my favorite Tarantino films from one of my not favorite Tarantino, or one of my favorite Tarantino scenes from one of my not favorite Tarantino film, and the daughter there as well. I mean, you want to talk about a master of suspense there. I think this scene is extremely suspenseful when the daughter comes in and they're just talking and you're wondering what Uma Thurman's gonna do in this scene. And it definitely leaves you on the edge of your seat as a viewer. But otherwise, I did not find many redeeming factors of this film. I found it very, very far fetched, the idea. And for a far fetched idea, I liked how it was executed, but I just could not get into the subject matter of the film. So for that reason, I give this one, I'm not going to give it a 5. You're right. No Quentin Tarantino film is just average, but I'll give it that 5.5 out of 10. I will say that
Okay.
this film had a few redeeming factors that make it not quite, I would say, a good film, but definitely above average. It's on late night TV. I'll throw it on. I'll watch it. I'll enjoy it for what it is. But to me, there are too many factors that make this one over the top that I don't really buy into the story to give it anything higher than a 5.5.
Yeah, for me, I think this is a good movie. I think this is an enjoyable experience because number one, I find the action very thrilling in this movie, like you just noted. Lots of great, like when she pulls that cereal box and boom, it's a gun, bam. Like I think that totally took like made me jump out of my seat. I thought that was awesome. This is a good movie because the action is well edited, and yeah, sure, the violence is kind of like blood spurting out like a water fountain, but I think the cinematography kind of blends with it together, makes it good. I think that's what makes it really good for me. And one thing that I experienced that last night when I watched it was I love that twist ending at the end where it's Bill and he's just talking to the lawyer of Oren Ishii, and he just kind of drops at the end of the film. I think is a perfect way to end the film. Does she know her daughter's alive? And I just thought that was an excellent twist. I would have never have seen coming. And one more good point for me before I finish my thing on Kill Bill Volume One is I know you're going to disagree with this, Ryan. So I really want to hear what you say. Uma Thurman is incredible in this movie. Some of the other performances in the movie for me are a little cheesy, a little corny, but Uma Thurman is totally believable. The dialogue she does get, there's very little dialogue in this movie. Another thing I knock against it is Quentin Tarantino doesn't get to fully express all his awesome dialogue. There's only a few scenes in it that really take advantage of that dialogue. Um, but Uma Thurman, when she wakes up out of the coma and she realizes her baby's gone, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I love the acting by Uma Thurman in this movie. But for me, Kill Bill, 7 out of 10. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. Uma Thurman's acting is something that I hadn't really considered in this film just because, like I said, the story I couldn't get in. But you're right. She does give a great impersonation and taking advantage of that Quentin Tarantino style again, a character that we slowly learn more and more about as her character develops. And she does a good job playing this role. I still prefer her in the role of Mia Wallace. I think this film, I don't know, I guess I just still couldn't buy into her being an assassin. Maybe that's just it. I struggled buying into her in that role, and I struggled buying into a lot of these characters in that role.
Fair enough. I mean, I could see that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I get what you're saying here, but for me, I don't know. It's believable enough, but what throws me off is like the fountains of blood and like some of the fight choreography when you can tell they're easily using wires and like Uma Thurman's like flying through the air.
Yeah. Yeah. Once again,
So yeah,
over the top and unbelievable. That's
yeah,
what truly hurt this film to me.
yeah. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I like this movie. So let's move on from here. Kill Bill Volume Two. I watched this movie for the first time today. I mean, I had not. This is one of the few I hadn't seen besides Jackie Brown. Watched it with my mom, and we were both sitting here, and I didn't have high expectations because usually sequels aren't better, except for like Empire Strikes Back. But I mean, uh, I was blown away by this movie. I did not expect it to be as good as it was. For me, like one of the weak points Ryan pointed out, the story in Kill Bill is not that fleshed out. Um, at least in volume one. In volume two, for me, there was so much backstory. There was so much great dialogue, like two times the amount of epic dialogue, two times the amount of epic moments. For me, Kill Bill Volume 2 is an 8 out of 10, a great movie. I know Ryan's going to be shocked by that because he only likes this one slightly more, but I mean, for me, this was a huge full point jump from 7 to 8. For me, I think this is a great, great movie. A few errors with the pacing, I think. Once again, the pacing in this movie is not as great as it could be, just like in Kill Bill Volume 1. Other than that, though, the action, he doubled down on what he did in the first movie. I thought that was epic. Michael Madsen delivers one of the most coolest, grisliest characters in this movie. He is so awesome. Ryan, take it away from here. I'm thinking about more.
Yeah, there's your saving grace for this film for me, and what makes it better than Kill Bill Volume 1. Michael Madsen's character is fantastic. I absolutely love his performance in this film. Uh, I also, yeah, he does a great job. He really, really, really captures his character there, and I think that's what Michael Madsen really does. He plays similar characters in different films, and we see it in Reservoir Dogs. We see it again in The Hateful Eight. He plays a similar type of character and everything, but man, oh man, does he have that sort of grisly, soft-spoken character down, and he is fantastic in the film. Once again, though, I'm not a fan of the Kill Bill series. I can't buy into it. This one, my big flaw, and don't get me wrong, I love backstory. I love seeing all of the bride's training. I
Uh-huh.
enjoy that, but it's still quite outlandish to me. I mean, when they bury her alive, to me, that's it. She's done, over. And I just, like I said, I understand Quentin Tarantino pushes the envelope a lot with a lot of his scenes, the gore that happens. Uh, but I think with the dialogue that he puts in on a lot of his films, it makes it believable. It makes you believe that the events that happened in Pulp Fiction happened in 1970s Los Angeles. The diamond heist happened in Reservoir Dogs. I cannot buy in that any of this happened in Kill Bill Volume 1 or 2. And maybe it's my flaw as a moviegoer. I like a film that is either so far outlandish that you almost can't believe it, like Star Wars, big Star Wars fan, that's so far out of the blue that it's science fiction, or a film that something happens that's believable. When you get a film like Kill Bill or Kill Bill Volume 2, to me, there's just enough of a fantasy element and just enough of a reality element, uh, true fiction almost, if you will, that they don't meld for me. And I mean, that's my problem with these films. And by no means are they bad films. They're just not my cup of tea. So 5.5 out of 10 for Kill Bill Volume 1, 6 out of 10 for Kill Bill Volume 2. Michael Madsen definitely saves this film. A little bit more backstory, which I like, learning a lot more about the bride and her backstory with Bill as well. But still, like I said, the story doesn't do it for me like the rest of Tarantino's films do.
Okay, I mean, I can see where you're coming from. For me, the things that bother you did not bother me. I mean, I like the part where she's training with her master. I do agree. It's very, very over the top. The guy with the huge beard, huge eyebrows. Oh man. But I mean, I like it's cool. And the whole fight where she's punching to get out of the thing. I mean, me and my mom were cheering like, "Get out! Yes, yes!" And then she comes through, and then the hand pokes through the dirt, and the music plays. I thought that was a great moment. And one thing I know we definitely disagree on is like the five finger heart stopping pressure point thing.
Yep.
For me, I was like, well, how is that ever going to come into the movie? And then when she kills Bill at the end with it, and he kind of just has those five final steps and then dies, I thought that added something to the scene. I was like, wow, this is making it more emotional. That being, Bill is a villainous character. He's a terrible guy. But in this movie, you feel a tiny pinch of sadness for him just because he was so great with this the daughter, and
Yeah.
he was treating her nicely. And then, but you realize, wait, he's done some terrible things to Uma Thurman's character. And I say Uma Thurman's character because they don't really give away her name in the first one. And the second one, they do say it's Kiddo,
Kiddo, yeah.
Beatrix Kiddo.
Hmm.
And but for most of the movie, they call her the bride in the credits, or they actually bleep it out when characters say her name. I thought that was kind of cool, but I could see why that's a little corny as well. But yeah, those things didn't bother me as much. Um, I absolutely jumped out of my seat when Bud dies. Michael Madsen's character Bud dies from the snake out of the
Hmm.
suitcase. Oh my gosh, I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
And
his
follows,
his whole
yeah,
story arc is fantastic, and yeah, great great death scene as well.
yeah,
Yeah, Bud's character, Michael Madsen, is fantastic in this film. Like I said, as much as I don't like the film, maybe it's because his character, I find his character believable. He hits me as the assassin type,
yeah.
and maybe that's why I like his character, and this is a saving grace for the film. I buy into his character. He's very believable in his role, and that's what I have to say about his character and saving this film for me compared to the rest of them.
Yeah, and the scene that follows it, where Ellie Driver,
Yeah.
played by I can't remember who exactly is playing her. Maybe you could look it up, Ryan.
Yeah,
But
you go ahead. You finish your
okay,
point. I'll let you know who plays her.
great. Okay, so yeah, and Uma Thurman comes in, kicks her. I mean, some of the cuts of Uma Thurman's, just the close up of the feet kicking her. They're a little cheesy, a little corny, but honestly, the sword battle they have is so awesome. And when Uma Thurman rips out her other eye and she just totally leaves her to die there,
Yeah.
to me, I thought that was pretty epic. Did you find out, Ryan?
Yeah, so it's Daryl Hannah playing Ellie Driver.
Daryl Hannah,
And yeah, I
she's
mean
cool.
that's a cool Tarantino death scene once again though. It's over the top. The
It is
sword
way
fight
over
is
the top.
over the top.
It is way over the top. Okay, then I think we've covered Kill Bill. This was one of the ones we were going to be kind of at opposite ends on mostly.
Mhm.
Um, so let's see. So we've gone through 4, 5, and now we're on to Quentin Tarantino film number 6. And correct me if I'm wrong, that's Inglorious Bastards, is it not, Ryan?
That's correct. And I think you and I this may be another point of contention for us.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Ryan. You go into it.
I'm an absolute huge fan of Inglorious Bastards. First things first, this was my first Quentin Tarantino film, first one I had ever seen. Uh, was not a fan, believe it or not, when I first saw it, not knowing anything about Quentin Tarantino. Just sort of went into the movie, not knowing what to expect, and I was like, none of this happened. I was back to my realist. Hitler wasn't killed in this way. So it really didn't stand out to me the first time. But after studying the rest of Tarantino's films, I saw it come up on Netflix. Said I'm going to give this one another try, and I love it. I love the ride this film takes you through. I think Christoph Waltz makes it an incredible film. He is truly an evil villain, just toying with his victims. The way he plays it as the evil Hans Landa is just stellar. That first scene at the dairy farm,
Oh man,
oh
yeah.
man, where he changes to English and then changes back to French, saying he's going to leave, bring the daughters back, and it's just his men, and they obliterate the floor. Oh man, this film to me, it it is a great film, and I know some people say it struggles with pacing. I know there are some slow scenes, but to me that makes the action scenes, and especially the final scene in the theater, just that much more rewarding.
Okay, yeah. I mean, for me, this is I like this movie. I don't want people to think that I don't like this movie. For me, this is a 7 out of 10, a good film. I think that there is a huge slow spot in this movie, and that dragged it down for me. I remember almost dozing off in this movie. The only Tarantino movie I almost dozed off in. I couldn't believe it. But I will agree, Ryan. Christoph Waltz is a master of acting, especially in this movie. He is so great in this movie. Some incredible suspenseful dialogue once again from Tarantino in that scene Ryan was talking about. Um, let's see, Brad Pitt. He's good in this movie. I don't think he's as great as
Oh,
some people say he is. I think
oh,
he's good in this movie. Not amazing, not fantastic. He's just good. You want to say something about
I
that?
no, I have to disagree. I
Okay.
think I'm not the biggest Brad Pitt fan, but
Uh-huh.
having seen him now in two Quentin Tarantino films, seeing him as Aldo the Apache in this film, and seeing him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, little teaser here, foreshadowing. I think Tarantino brings the best out of Brad Pitt, and I thought he was fantastic in this film. I think he plays the role over the top. That's how this role needed to be played. Didn't know if an actor like Brad Pitt, having seen him in other films, would be able to harness that character, this almost madman general leading the bastards. He does it perfectly to me. He is fantastic in this film. I thought it was miscast when I first read who it was. I was completely wrong. And I think the way he plays off of Christoph Waltz in that scene when they're captured and they're talking back and forth is fantastic. Some of the best Tarantino dialogue, maybe a slower scene for Tarantino, people who are more accustomed to blood, guts, and gore that you see like in Kill Bill. But the suspense in that scene as well, where he's captured and they're going back and forth, even talking about nicknames. I love how he played the role.
Yeah, he's good in this movie to me. I mean, he's not as great as I think he is, but let's talk about some of the other characters, Ryan. Let me know if you don't know who I'm talking about, but Michael Fassbender playing the English guy. Do you know who I'm talking about here?
Yes, I do know who you're talking about, and
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken, you're gonna refer to the scenes that he's in. Truly, yeah. I mean, well, I'll be honest with you. Most of the scenes that he's in, once he is introduced, I think that's where really your slow point in the film starts.
Yeah, yeah,
And I mean,
yeah,
there's a great suspenseful scene. Don't get me wrong. The scene in the bar, yeah, the three definitely where they're with the German officers who are
love that
celebrating.
scene.
Yeah, it's a great scene, but there's definitely a big slow point leading up to that. First, when you have
Yep,
him introduced into the film, and then when they're sitting scoping out the bar.
yep, yep. I,
Definitely a slow scene. I couldn't agree more with you. But go ahead.
yeah,
You were
yes,
making a point.
yeah. So like, for me, I couldn't agree more. Everything that happens before with Michael Fassbender, kind of slow. I mean, you have to introduce the character somehow, but it feels a little heavy-handed to me. But once it gets in that bar and, he starts messing up with the German 3, and I think that is very, very suspenseful. Michael Fassbender is one of my favorite actors, and he's good in this movie. He's really great in this movie, I think. Um, but I don't know. For me, like his character didn't serve that much of a purpose besides that in the movie. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, the key role of his character is to blow the cover of the spy, the German actress there.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's not there, if he doesn't screw up the three, and they have that bar fight, or bar massacre, so to speak, uh, Landa doesn't find the shoe, and you don't have that great scene where they're in the theater office. He goes, "What's the saying? If the shoe fits," and puts it on her foot, and then kills her. Oh man, I mean, I agree. Unnecessary, with the exception of that one scene, because that what is it? Stiglitz is the other one there, and he's a former German officer. He's not going to screw that up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think you have to have him there as the character that makes the mistake that leads to somewhat the downfall of the Bastards plan. I mean, of course, they end up getting their way in the end of this film with the help of Shoshana and her character, unbeknownst to them. But definitely, you're right in the sense that I don't know that the introduction was necessary for how he was utilized in the film.
Yeah, and I think we went over that well. The other thing that the reason this one is a 7 for me is, for me, I got a little lost in the plot for this one, and it comes around the whole mission behind the bastards. Besides just collecting the Nazi scalps, but besides that, I remember being a little confused in this movie. Whereas in most Tarantino movies, I'm fine with that for a little bit, but for this one, I couldn't follow a little bit of the plot for this one. For me, I got a little bit lost in it, and the whole thing with Shoshana's plan versus the Bastards' plan. For me, it got a little convoluted. But what I do want to say is I think the message in this movie is a great message. It's once again, similar in the vein of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's a film about film. I mean, the crux of the movie happens in a movie theater. The climax of the movie happens in a movie theater. That speaks to itself, is that it's film that takes down the Nazis, but it's film that also what they thought would take them to the top. What do you think about that?
No, you're absolutely right, and I think Quentin Tarantino does utilize this. You see it in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as well. It speaks numbers to what his subplots are, and I think that's why it's special to see a movie like this in the theater. And unfortunately, this far out you can't, but
Yeah.
you get an eerie feeling when you're watching the film about the movie theater and you're watching that theater burn down, and it
Yes.
it adds a level to that film, a deeper level of, I don't know, discomfort is the right word, because it's enjoyable. You know you're safe in that scene, but it adds that suspense, that almost rush of adrenaline when you're watching this film, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything else you want to add? I think I've said what I've needed to say. 7 out of 10 for you. It's a
I gave it a 7.5.
okay.
So we don't digress as far as I thought we would on this film. I didn't know you were as big of a fan of this film as you said you were.
Uh huh.
I know not many people like this film as much as they like his other films, but 7.5 out of 10, definitely. Borderline of a great film.
Okay.
Definitely the one thing that holds it back does have some pacing issues, big slow point in the middle, that makes it, sometimes I'm hesitating. Do I want to watch this through and through again? Because, it's gonna kill an afternoon for me. But
Right. Yeah.
it is a great film, and when I do muster up the strength to sit down and watch it,
Uh huh.
I'm locked in and I love it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so for me, seven, good, an enjoyable film. For me, it was really the story that brought it down a little bit for me, the pacing, a few things with Michael Fassbender's character. But other than that, Christoph Waltz's performance, let alone, raises this to a enjoyable experience. We can't praise that man enough. Um, let's move on next, Ryan. What's our next film? Go ahead and introduce that.
So we're gonna go right into Django Unchained. One great Christoph Waltz performance to another, and on top of this, you have a brilliant performance by Christoph Waltz. You have a brilliant performance by Jamie Foxx. You have an incredible performance by Leonardo DiCaprio, and I think a role that is, sometimes overlooked in this film. How about a
Absolutely.
brilliant performance by Samuel L. Jackson?
Absolutely, absolutely. Leo and Samuel Jackson are both completely overlooked in this movie. I think way too much.
Yeah, I think if Christoph Waltz as Hans Landa is the best villain in a Tarantino film. I mean, Michael Madsen is up there. Is both. I believe he's Mr. Blonde
Correct.
in Reservoir Dogs. He's also a villain in as Bud in Kill Bill Volume Two. But I think as Candy, as Monsieur Candy, uh, Leonardo DiCaprio may take the cake, even better than Landa. He is truly evil, sadistic. This man is demented.
Yes.
But I think the commentary in it is men like him were not that uncommon in the time. And that's why we are happy to see someone like him see that demise. So definitely, I would say this film, besides Pulp Fiction, I would say thus far of the films we discussed, the best ensemble performance of any Tarantino film.
Ooh, okay. I'd have to agree with you there. For me, the standout, of course, Christoph Waltz. He's so likable in this movie, so heartfelt in this movie, and I mean, of course, his death at the end. I mean, I was heartbroken to see him die at the end, but at least he went out like an absolute awesome, cool, great guy with the freaking boom. I love that part. Kind of evocative of Taxi Driver. I know maybe you haven't seen that movie, Ryan.
I have not seen Taxi Driver, no.
Okay, a little bit evocative of that, but yeah. Let's talk about Jamie Foxx. A little behind the scenes is that Quentin Tarantino did not want Jamie Foxx for this movie. He originally wanted Will Smith for this movie. Did you know that, Ryan?
I did not know that.
Will Smith was in line, ready to do this movie, but then he backed out at the last second due to another scheduling conflict or something like that. And Quentin Tarantino kind of let Jamie Foxx in, and it's the movie's all the better for it. Jamie Foxx is fantastic in this movie. I've not seen one better fleshed out main character in a Quentin Tarantino movie than Jamie Foxx's Django. Would you agree?
I completely agree. And once again, I think sticking to the Tarantino storytelling style, we as an audience are brought into the film. We are introduced knowing very little about both Django as well as Dr. King Schultz, who is Christoph Waltz's character, and we learn about them as the film goes on, which keeps us as an audience locked in to this 2.5 hour long, what some people would call marathon film. But it's because as the film goes along, we are all learning. These are not characters that are pre-designed that everyone knows. We are peeling back these layers, learning about these characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few lines I love in this movie, namely Django saying, "I love the way you die, boy." I think that's what he says, right?
Yeah, it is exactly what he says in response. Yeah, because
Yep.
what does he say? I believe the guy he kills says something like that to him
Says it
in
to him
verse. Yeah,
before.
yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, for me, that was so relieving, so gratifying. I was like,
oh yeah.
"Yes, so
The
cool."
line I believe is I like the way you beg, boy, and his response. You're absolutely right. That is a moment of pure justice.
Yes, absolutely. And another thing that I found really gratifying in this movie is the final action scene to see Django just let loose on all these dudes, just start murking them. I thought it was one of the best action scenes ever put in a Quentin Tarantino movie.
And I think honestly, yes, that's a great action scene, but there are so many great action scenes in this film from the minute we get to Candyland.
Yeah,
Scene
absolutely.
after scene, just fantastic.
Yeah, and yeah, speaking of Candyland, what a great set design. What a great production design. I mean, as soon as you walk into that land, you see that guy that's dying and you learn more about it and the dogs are let loose on him, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I mean, geez, you immediately know this is the darkest point the story is going to reach.
Yeah, well, you do. Speaking about the set design, you definitely see the evolution from Reservoir Dogs to now we're at Django Unchained. Definitely an evolution, and definitely speaks to the success, the wild success that Quentin Tarantino has had to create something like that. But you're absolutely right. The way the splendor of it, and yet the darkness definitely there is truly memorable about this film.
And I feel like since we mentioned it before, we did not give enough love to Samuel L. Jackson in this movie. He completely disappears in his character. He's unlike any of his other characters I've ever seen him in another movie. I mean, gosh, talk about Samuel L. Jackson in this movie, Ryan.
Definitely shows off his range. I mean, he if Candy is truly the upfront, flamboyant villain. I think Samuel L. Jackson's character is really just the quiet old man pulling the strings in the background. And that final scene that he's in with Django, he has him chained up, and I think he's going to castrate him.
Yeah,
And that just a truly evil scene, totally anti how he's been in the entire film. First of all, playing more the quiet, I believe he's the butler there,
yes,
but very different from Samuel L. Jackson roles we have seen before. Tarantino or not, Samuel L. Jackson is very much an upfront, in your face kind of actor. And to see his range playing this character, the more quiet, elderly man, an observer, and yet so active in the antagonist role, is
yes.
truly a great performance. And that's why I like to say, and I said at the top with this one, really an under underappreciated actor in this film, because there are so many great performances but should not be forgotten.
Absolutely. I mean, I love this movie. For me, this movie is a 9 out of 10, Ryan. I think this is an amazing movie. You and me have watched it many, many times. I mean, I know you remember the most recent time you and me watched this, but I mean, we love this movie. This is a very great watchable movie. Um, Over and over, I wouldn't mind owning it on Blu-ray. Um, yeah, I mean, any final closing thoughts on this one, Ryan? What's your score?
Yeah, so I give this one an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Definitely great film. uh it takes a lot for me. I will say it takes a lot for me to go out and own something on Blu-ray and watch it again and again and again, just unprovoked, just throw it in. I have nothing better to do. I'm going to watch this film. Uh, but definitely a great film. Definitely something that if someone else says, I've never seen Django before, I'm happy to sit down and watch it with them. I'm locked in the whole movie. I'm not, okay, I've seen this. I'm going to get some work done maybe. You know, it's a movie that has me glued to the screen the whole time. So I give it an 8 out of 10. Definitely uh, trying to find, a real problem with this film. And I guess the one would just be I didn't want to see Christoph Waltz's character die. That was the one
Yeah.
thing that I think hurt this film. I really wish he got a chance to sort of ride off in the sunset, because he is a character that I believe is so deserving of that. And it's heartbreaking to see him die, albeit a great way to go out, as you alluded to earlier. But that's the one thing that I wish was changed a little bit about this film.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, how do you feel about the length of this movie? I know this is a fairly long movie. I think running at 2.5 maybe hours.
I put this movie up there with Pulp Fiction, with Reservoir Dogs, with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which we'll cover later. Long films, or even Hateful Eight. They're long films, but they don't feel like long films because you're so immersed in the film. I definitely have no problem sitting down and watching this film, and I'm not looking at my watch. Like I said, Inglorious Bastards, why it's a 7.5, and Django is an 8. That scene in the middle where we're meeting new characters, I'm looking at my watch. I'm saying, okay, maybe I have something else I could be doing this afternoon. But definitely with Django, I'm not doing that. I'm locked in the whole movie. So I think the length is great because we get to know enough about every character.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so Ryan gives it an 8. I give it a 9. I think this is an amazing movie. Ryan thinks it's a great movie. I think that's a fair assessment of this film. Let's move on to the eighth film by Quentin Tarantino, which is properly named Hateful Eight. And this is the longest film Quentin Tarantino has ever made. And me and Ryan both saw this in the theater. This is the first movie we both saw by Quentin Tarantino in the theater, right?
That is correct. Yep. Yep.
Okay, yeah, and we went and saw this. I love that ultra wide 75 millimeter Panavision aspect ratio. I mean, you and me sitting through this 3 hour butt buster of a movie. I just remember sitting there and thinking, gosh, this feels like it's maybe an hour and a half, 2 hour movie, but it's one of the most enjoyable long movies I've seen. It's up there with like The Godfather as one of the best long movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think we both went into the film worrying, knowing about the length. That was, I think, the number one thing that was covered in all the columns was it's a long film. Be
Yes.
prepared for that. And I think you and I were both very worried about that. We came out of the film wanting more. I mean, it was such a great film. Once again, I think Tarantino goes back to his Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs roots. We're just learning more and more about each character as the film goes on. And what's great about this film is halfway through the film, you've learned all this about these characters, and then they turn out to be different people altogether. They're part of
Yes.
this Domergue gang, uh, or Domingre gang. There we go. Kurt Russell
Yes.
calls her Daisy Domergue, but it's the Domingre, the Jody Domingre gang.
Yep.
And once again, I mean, man, Samuel L. Jackson in this movie, he is fantastic from start to finish. He is in just about every scene in this film,
Yep.
and every scene is better because of his character. Uh, I have I have very few negative things to say about this film. I will say my one complaint with the length, it was a very long lead-in.
A lead in. Okay.
Just that's my one complaint about the film. Definitely the lead in with the stagecoach coming in with the blizzard on the hill, and you have the opening credits playing. I think that went over the top, and I think honestly the film, even if it were 10-15 minutes shorter without that lead in, wouldn't have gotten as much of a bad rap as it did for its length. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, where this film struggles, a lot of people sit and watch this and watch this and watch this, and they come almost disengaged with the film before it even starts.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that, but for me, that's not why I marked down this movie a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and give my score. For me, Hateful Eight is a 9.5 out of 10. It is very close to a masterpiece for me. Um, I think that the one half point I knocked down on this movie is because um, most of the, well, I guess what could you say? Second half of the movie is about figuring out who poisoned the coffee, right? And
Absolutely, yes.
I was having so much fun with this excellent execution of mystery, suspense, thriller, and having trying to figure out who poisoned the coffee and trying to read each character's looks. It's almost like Clue at that point, and to some degree. And I was like, "Whoa, okay, this is so fun to watch." And then for me, he gave it away just a little too soon. I was having fun figuring it out, and then all of a sudden, Channing Tatum shows up, and everything kind of goes off from there, and quickly the movie recovers and becomes amazing again. But for me, I was just like, oh, I wish they had just teased us a little bit longer, to before we got the reveal. But for me, the opening scene that is long, I think it's some of the best cinematography I've ever seen. It is some of the best shot direction, some of the best landscapes. I mean, he was out there in the snow, and I could just only imagine the guys behind the camera doing this, man. I mean, for me, it doesn't slow it down because I'm a cinema junkie like that. I think I love the cinematography in this movie, and the one location, genius. What do you think about that?
I love, and I don't think you could have put it any better by saying the Clue like aspect, having
Yes.
everyone trapped in this cabin in the blizzard and trying to figure it out. And I just wanted to add one more thing about that scene. How about the narration during this who done it sort of caper film done by Quentin Tarantino, if I'm not mistaken? He is the voice that is doing the narration there.
Yeah, I think so.
Sort of lining around where everyone was at each scene. I think it is a really, really well done. It's a great style of film, and there are other
Yes.
films out there that do this really well, the Who Done It film, and there are films out there that it's just really poorly done. That it's you spend the whole film trying to figure it out, and there's a cop out ending. I think the way he did this one definitely kept me engaged the whole time. I never at one point thought I knew who it was until the reveal. And I think what else was done with it was after the reveal, like you said, there's still about 45 minutes of great cinema following it. I mean, the ending of this film, come on, the hanging of Domergue,
So satisfying.
it is so satisfying because when John Wilk the Hangman finds you, you don't come in dead, you hang, and
Yes.
that was
Great
just such
line.
a gratifying ending. John Root, there we go, John
Yep.
Root the Hangman.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Kurt Russell in this movie. I mean, nobody likes Kurt Russell sometimes. For me, I'm a huge Kurt Russell fan. And for me, this is his number two performance all time. I think his number one performance is in a movie called The Thing. I always recommend that movie. Maybe we'll talk about it more one day. But Kurt Russell is awesome in this movie. He's very, very good in this movie. What do you think?
Yeah, Kurt Russell does a great job. He's a character though. I think what Tarantino does well in this one, and I knocked Django a little bit for it. He makes Kurt Russell's character just unlikable enough that you're not completely heartbroken when he dies. He's not. He's clearly a good man. I mean, his intentions seem to be correct, uh, but he does some bad stuff. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I think yes, the people he's with are criminals, but the way he treats his bounties is almost inhuman. But I think that adds to his character, and I think that's for the better for Tarantino because when he dies, you are upset, but you recover in the film because he dies. He's the first one to die, correct?
I don't think he's the first one to die, but we'll have to. I mean, I've seen it twice, and I still. I mean, there's so much movie to remember, But I'm not sure. I really like all of the cast in this movie. I like. I think this movie excels in adding this kind of lore. I want to say lore slash mythology behind like the whole relationship between Samuel Jackson and the Union and the Confederates. All that stuff. I think that adds this whole mythology slash black story slash aspect to all of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the ending of this film so much more satisfying. Seeing him and Colonel Marquez and Chris Mannix, the sheriff, there. I mean, this man who this crazy Union fighter who burned down the entire POW camp to get out, even with his own soldiers in it. Very, very much a Union fighter versus Mannix, who's the son of one of the most notorious Confederate generals. I think to see them at the end come together for the greater good is truly a fantastic final moment.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Excellent way to end the film. And we could talk about this way more, but I think that's a great point to end this portion of the review on. So I give it a 9.5 out of 10. Ryan, did you say your score for this movie?
I did not say my score yet, so
Oh,
I'll
go
give
ahead.
this one an 8.5 out of 10.
Oh,
This
okay.
film, I would say this one just misses being an excellent film. It is definitely a great film, but like I said, small things definitely. That intro kind of overdoes it for me.
Yeah,
I
opening.
understand from your point of view, from a cinematographic point of view, it is a brilliant shot. But is this a nature film, or is this a whodunit film? I want to get into it. I want to start knowing my characters. I want to see how they get to being in this cabin, and it went on for quite a bit longer than I thought was necessary.
Okay, yeah, I could see why you would knock it down a few points because of that. I mean, it's a long movie already. I mean, I could see why you would think the experience would be way enhanced if they maybe cut a little bit more out of it. But that's Tarantino for you. He is dead set on what he wants to make. He doesn't let anyone tell him how to do it. And if that means making a 3 hour, 15-minute movie, it means, gosh darn, I think I am going to make a 3 hour, 15-minute movie. So, that brings us up to speed, Ryan. We are now on the ninth film, the most recent film. Quentin Tarantino has stated he will only make 10 movies. 10. And this is the ninth movie. Came out very recently. It's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And for me, I saw this one with Ryan Barnett and his lovely girlfriend Caitlin. And while she might have fallen asleep in this movie, I had the complete opposite reaction. I think this is his best movie since Pulp Fiction. That's how much I loved this movie. I mean, gosh, there's so much I could say about it. I'm going to just give my score and then let you talk, Ryan, while I think about how to organize my thoughts. For me, I'm still kind of thinking about this based on what you say. For me, as of right now, this movie is a 10 out of 10. What do you think about that, Ryan?
I think you're right on pace with me, right on par with me. I give it a
Okay.
9.5 out of 10.
Okay, nine and a
The
half.
only reason I give it a 9.5 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10 is because it's not Pulp Fiction. I know,
Oh,
I
okay.
know, I know that's horrible to say, but you sit down, you watch this film on its own, and it is a great film. But you put it side by side with Pulp Fiction, and you're going to call Pulp Fiction a great, a masterpiece film. You watch this one, I would not quite give it the same masterpiece status. I think the storytelling in this film is brilliant. I think learn the way the characters are introduced and interwoven, very a la Pulp Fiction. I love it, love it, love it. Now, here's my one complaint. This film very much dialogue heavy, very much storytelling heavy. That being said, it makes the final scene worth it. I do not want to say that that final scene was not enough of the Tarantino action effect.
Yep.
But besides that film or that scene of the film, there isn't much action in this one, especially when you compare it to Pulp Fiction.
Absolutely. I think there's not as much action in this one. But for me, where this one succeeds is that this is a movie. All the Quentin Tarantino movies we talked about before have been action, thriller, suspense. One of those categories. You could fit him into some of those categories. It's hard to genretize, Quentin Tarantino. But for me, this is the first time he did a full on comedy. I think the comedy in this movie is some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen in a movie. namely Leonardo DiCaprio once again is awesome. I think he's deserving of an Oscar, even though he didn't win it. I loved him when he's I love that part in the trailer. You and me were cracking up.
Oh, that is without a doubt the best scene with Leonardo DiCaprio on film in this movie. Now, you're gonna say that Leonardo DiCaprio was fantastic in this film, and I agree with you.
Uh-huh.
But to me, who stole this film? Brad Pitt. Once again,
Yep.
Quentin Tarantino bringing out the absolute best in Brad Pitt's acting ability. He was fantastic in this film, and his character arc of this has been uh has been stuntman, and even there's this mystique behind him. It's only mentioned a couple of times in the film, but that he killed his wife, and he has this mystique about him. You want to know what's more. Did this happen? You only see the one scene where he's on the dive boat with her. Did he kill his wife? We don't know. Is this just banter in the cinema world of 1970s Hollywood? I think he is fantastic, and he is very much the id, I would say, of Leonardo DiCaprio's ego, in the sense that he and Leonardo DiCaprio seem like they are almost one in the same. It's just Brad Pitt realizes who he is. Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't necessarily realize that. But you bring this all together, you bring them back together, and that final scene, you see it. I mean, you see Brad Pitt doing everything here when the Manson gang breaks in to his spot is in next to the Tate Polanski Tate estate,
Yes.
and you see just Brad Pitt sort of kicking ass here in this scene. And then in the end, who gets to be considered the hero? DiCaprio comes in and with his flamethrower fries the final member, and then goes over and knocks on Sharon Tate's door and says, "Hey, we just had gang break into our house, but it's okay. I handled them." I just think the juxtaposition between those two characters is basically the same men is fantastic, and I love, love, love Brad Pitt's performance again. We've seen both of those actors go over the top here. Pitt and DiCaprio now in two Tarantino films. Of course, DiCaprio in Django Unchained and now Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Brad Pitt in Inglourious Bastards and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And man, oh man, these guys, Tarantino brings the best out of those two actors. And they're great actors, don't get me wrong, with
Yeah.
or without Tarantino. But they give their best performances for Quentin Tarantino films.
Absolutely, man. I think Brad Pitt deserved his Oscar award in this. I think he was amazing in this movie, carried the movie completely. I love everything with him and Margaret Qualley, who I think is one of the most gorgeous women I've seen in a Quentin Tarantino movie, even though she has the hairy armpits. But yeah, dude, she was friggin' awesome in this movie too. This is one of her first movies. She's only been in a few before this. This is her big break, and I think she was awesome in this movie. All the girls that are part of like the what were they called, the bunnies? Is that right? Yeah,
The I don't think they were the bunnies, no.
there's something
But
else.
I
Okay,
know who you're talking about, definitely.
yeah,
The
all
I
this
mean, essentially the members of the Manson family.
absolutely. Yeah, they did a great job in this, even though they're kind of just extras. I love that scene when he goes to oh shoot, am I Spawn Ranch? I
Spawn
got it.
Ranch,
Spawn
absolutely.
Ranch.
That is without a doubt. I was just about to talk about that. The best scene in the film, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it was so suspenseful out of nowhere. I've been laughing, I've been having fun. Me and my best bud are watching this movie. Excuse me, about two best buds, and I'm just having a great time in the theater. And then all of a sudden, there's this really suspenseful aspect where he's going next to the door. He wants to talk to the old guy. The old guy's sleeping. I think that's great. You want to talk about that scene a little more, Ryan?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's very much Tarantino suspense. That's why I wouldn't necessarily call this film a full-on comedy. I mean, it has all the aspects of a great Tarantino thriller, and I would not go as far as saying this is just a comedy. This is a thriller film. Don't get me wrong. It may not have the action of most Tarantino films, but it definitely has your scenes where you are on the edge of your seat, headlined by that scene at Spawn Movie Ranch. And you've got Squeaky there. uh, everyone just sort of the gang, the family following him as he's walking and approaching that front porch, and then he goes and talks to Spawn to see what's going on. You're sure, he's gonna say something's going on, and he gets there and he goes, "Yeah, who the hell are you?" He has no idea who he is in the end. But then you see, I think even afterwards, you get to the scene where his tires are slashed, and he kicks the crap out of the member of the family that slashes his tires. I think that's almost a redeeming scene. And I mean, there was so little with the Manson family in this film compared to what I was expecting. I thought this film was going to center on the Manson family, but those scenes were so poignant in the film, and they all add up into the final pieces of the puzzle when Tex and the two other girls come in and sort of storm the compound, unbeknownst that they're going to get their asses handed to them by Brad Pitt.
Rex? No, it was stupider than that. I love when he says that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, dude. Yeah, and quick behind the scenes thing, because I want to make sure we add behind the scenes things in this movie. I know, Ryan, we talked about this before. The girl that kind of steals the car and chickens out before those Manson guys go and kill into Leonardo DiCaprio's house. That girl that steals the car and runs away is Maya Hawke, the son of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. Could you imagine getting to work with the same director that worked with your mom all those years ago? I thought that was a great little tidbit behind there.
Yeah, that was really exciting when you told me that. I had no idea. Later on, I found out a little bit more about Maya Hawke through Stranger Things, where she sort of had, I would say, one of her bigger roles of late that's brought her into the spotlight. But just definitely a really cool tidbit there. And there's so many of those when you
El
look
Coyote,
into
a great
Tarantino.
restaurant that's in LA. Have you been to El Coyote?
I have been to El Coyote,
Me
yes.
too, and I sat at the exact same table that they were sitting at in that restaurant.
Yeah, I have definitely been there. Known for good food and strong drinks, definitely. But yeah, very good Mexican food, as you find all over Southern California.
Absolutely, and I mean, I think let's just finish it off. Oh wait, we did not talk about Margot Robbie in this movie. What do you think about her character arc?
I think we talked about this after the film, and I think we may disagree on her role in the film. To me, Margot Robbie's character was the sign of, there was still some innocence in Hollywood. As Sharon Tate, you enter the film and you see her with Polanski, and then you see the scene at the Playboy Mansion, and you think, oh, she's just this rich filmmaker's wife, and then you get to see more of her in real life. You see her going to the bookstore and then going and watching her film, and just the pure enjoyment she has from seeing herself on screen. To me, what this film showed was that there was still some innocence left in Hollywood, and essentially with her death and the death of her unborn child, with when the Manson family came and slaughtered her, was sort of a death of innocence in Hollywood. And that's what was redeeming about this film. I thought that she did survive. And the final scene is that conversation between her and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for me, the parts with Margot Robbie, some people say that she didn't need to be in this movie. I couldn't disagree more. Quentin Tarantino is using Margot Robbie for one specific thing in this movie, and that is to be his mouthpiece. It's about him enjoying to make films in Hollywood, despite the kind of phony nature that people usually associate with it. He's saying that I still get great enjoyment in going to the theater and seeing how people react to my movies. I love that part of it, how she's sitting there, and when people laugh and realize that they're laughing at her lines and they enjoy her in the movie, I think that's him saying, I really want people to enjoy my movies. That's what's keeping me going, even though I'm moving into my 10th and final film. So I think Margot Robbie was totally awesome in this movie. Okay, let's close this off with the final scene. You already kind of brought it up a little bit, but I remember in the theater, I don't know maybe if you remember this or not, but when Leonardo DiCaprio whips out that flamethrower that I had totally forgotten about it until except for at the beginning of the movie when they first brought it up. Dude, like when people went crazy in our theater when he brought out that flamethrower and lit her on fire. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do. Yeah, people were applauding, and We're very excited about that scene. I mean, you knew it had to come in because they touched on it. They were talking when he's in that original scene talking with Al Pacino, correct?
Yeah.
At Musso and Frank's. They're talking about the scene where, I hope you like fried sauerkraut. And then he said, that was actually a real scene. I actually had to use that. And you see him training with the flamethrower. You knew it was going to come back into the film when he said, they let me keep it.
Yeah.
But definitely, man, a redeeming factor. You
Yeah,
love
and I
to see
love the
that scene.
line too when he's practicing with it, and he goes, oh, whoa, whoa, that's too hot. Is there anything we could do about the heat? And then the guy says, it's a flamethrower. I
And
love
was
that
it
part.
you were the one who was sharing with me another little behind the scenes tidbit that was ad lib. That was actually Leonardo DiCaprio working with the flamethrower for the scene, and that was actually his reaction to using the flamethrower.
Yeah, I
And
think it
Quentin
was.
Tarantino just included it in the film because he said it was perfect. It fit the character.
Yeah, I mean Leonardo DiCaprio is like totally in character, and I love that aspect about it in this movie. Um, I don't know. I can't think of anything else to say. The only reason I kind of considered making this a 9.5 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10 is the ending left me a little like I don't know if I get what he was trying to say, but I'll admit after seeing it a second time and thinking about it more over time, I think this. I'm gonna stick firm. I'm gonna say this is a 10 out of 10. I mean, we'll say how we rank them all just in just a few minutes. But any closing thoughts on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
If you have not seen this film, this is the newest of the Quentin Tarantino films. If you haven't seen it yet, go out, see this film. I know it may have gotten some mixed reviews from certain people. You've got to see this film. You've got to take it in for yourself. It leaves a lot. It's totally different from a typical Tarantino thriller, and yet it's so much the same in the sense that he sticks to his roots of storytelling. And I think that's what makes this movie so special. So for those of you who haven't seen it, go out and see it. It is definitely worth the length of waiting to see it. I mean, we're in quarantine right now. Worth a pay-per-view cost to go
Absolutely.
see. You need to see this movie because this, newer Tarantino pays homage to older Tarantino, and it is not. I'm not going to give it masterpiece status just yet,
Yeah.
but it is about as close as you can get. Didn't know there was a Quentin Tarantino. There were Quentin Tarantino movies I'd like more than his first two, than Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs. I think this one is right up there with those two original.
Okay. Awesome. So now I think we do what the titular name of our show is. We go all the way from the bottom to the top of the list, and we just rank them.
All right, so going up worst to first, I'm gonna start with both at 8 and 7. Kill Bill Volume 1 at 8. Kill Bill Volume 2 at 7. They are not my favorite films. I mean, they're enjoyable, but I would not put them at the same status as the rest of the Tarantino films. For me, too much fantasy, over the top action scenes there. As Dom mentioned, the fountains of blood was just a little too much for me. In the outlandish scene or outlandish category there. So I'll put Kill Bill Volume 1 at 8 at a 5.5 out of 10. Kill Bill Volume 2 at 7 with a 6 out of 10. Now coming in at 6, and my top 6 here, this was very difficult for me because these are great films. Sixth, Inglorious Bastards. Love the film, love the film, love the film. Fatal flaw. In the middle of the film, we come to a screeching halt in necessary plot lines. So for that reason, it gets a 7.5 out of 10. Not quite a great film, but better than just a good film. Put it at sixth. At fifth, we'll go Django Unchained. 8 out of 10. Fantastic ensemble performance. Really wish we could have gotten Christoph Waltz a swan song other than a badass death. Would have loved to seen him ride off into the sunset. So we'll put that at 5 at an 8 out of 10. Fourth, we'll go Hateful Eight. Once again, a brilliant ensemble film, a brilliant performance. Who Done It was one of, or I believe Tarantino's only sort of Who Done It film. He does it perfectly without breaking any of his storytelling style. So we'll put Hateful Eight at fourth at an 8.5 out of 10. Third, we'll go Reservoir Dogs, 9 out of 10. Home run off the bat for Quentin Tarantino. Uh, as good as a first film that you can make, debut film you can make. 9 out of 10. As we mentioned, clearly though it was his first film, so it doesn't have quite the production value of these next two films. Number two, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, 9.5 out of 10. Fantastic film, definitely a must see. Great film, excellent film, definitely. But nothing will stand out to the top of my list. Number one, 10 out of 10. To me, the greatest film in cinematic history. Pulp Fiction does it all. It is a film full of great story, great acting, a great soundtrack, which I know we didn't touch on nearly enough, and great action, but the action does not take away from the story. You are locked in for this whole film, learning how these stories intertwine. You have four different plot lines all going on, all intertwining, and then that aha moment at the end. You've got that final scene. We come back to the diner from the original scene, and you have this survival of Jules and Vincent, or I believe Vincent's in the bathroom. No, he comes out in the end. But you have this final scene, and then you have Jules who gets to walk off into the sunset. He's done with this. He's seen it all. He has his revelation of who he is in Ezekiel 25:17. This film has everything, has all the components of a great film. Top of my list, 10 out of 10, Pulp Fiction.
I couldn't put it better myself, Ryan. I love the way you did your list. Great job there. So let me get into my list now. At the bottom of my list, I'm going to put Inglorious Bastards. This is the most lukewarm film I felt about, as we talked about. Some great aspects in this movie. Acting, very good suspense film. But for me, same as Ryan, huge pacing issue in the middle of the film, despite the great meaning of the film, despite the great acting. Number seven for me is Kill Bill Volume 1. I gave this one a 7 out of 10, as well as Inglourious Basterds was also a 7 out of 10. I liked Kill Bill Volume 1 a little bit more than Inglourious Basterds. I liked the action aspect of the film. The cheesy aspects didn't bother me as much, but I still found some of the violence a little too much, the fountains of blood, a few other over-the-top performances. But other than that, Kill Bill, good movie. Kill Bill Volume 2, I just watched it today. Great movie, loved it. I'd give that number 6 on my list, an 8 out of 10. Number 5, Django Unchained, amazing movie, 9 out of 10. Excellent acting across the board, excellent production design, excellent across the board. Maybe it's a movie that you wouldn't, I don't know, buy on Blu-ray, but I would. I mean, I think it's great. I love all the aspects about this movie. There's only a few things that held me back, but 9 out of 10, amazing. Number 5 on my list. 4, Reservoir Dogs, one of the early Quentin Tarantino movies. Like I said, maybe some people would have been shocked at first if this is the first movie they've seen to see this much of a heavy dialogue, little action. But to me, this is a great debut. I love this movie. I'm going to put it at number 4, just above Django Unchained. Um, Number 3, the top 3. Number 3, I have Hateful Eight. Like I said, this is a close to masterpiece movie for being a 3-hour, 15-minute movie. I was thrilled the entire runtime. This is a 9.5 out of 10. Number 3 on my list, Hateful Eight. Number 2, I'm going to put Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I gave it a 10 out of 10. I thought it was the best movie since Pulp Fiction. Nothing's going to top Pulp Fiction. You guys already know that. It's one of my favorite top 3 movies of all time. This is the closest I think Tarantino's got to making a great movie like Pulp Fiction. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. At number 1, of course, come on, Pulp Fiction, 10 out of 10, a masterpiece, one of the greatest films ever made, completely unique, completely rewatchable. I don't know why I don't own it on Blu-ray. It's one of my favorite movies ever. I should have it on Blu-ray so I can watch it whenever I want, but I've already seen the film like 6, 7 times, so I don't know if I will. Yeah, so number 1, Pulp Fiction. That's at the top of the list for me. It's also at the top of the list for Ryan. But that should pretty much be almost the end of our show, right, Ryan? I do have one little news story that is related to Quentin Tarantino. You want to hear about that real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So I was reading a little earlier. I think this news came out maybe a month or two ago, but shortly after the release of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino has agreed, since he's only making 10 films, but he has agreed to work on a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood television show that will be appearing on HBO, I believe. I'm pretty sure it was HBO. What do you think about that? I'm hyped for that.
I'm extremely excited to see where they go with that series. Should be great. I'm sure, because Quentin will have a hand in it, it will not digress too far from the original film and storyline. Keep our characters intact, or our stories intact and setting intact. So I'm definitely hyped for a series like that. I'm also hyped for film number 10. I've heard some talks that it may be Kill Bill Volume 3. Whether it's that or
What do you think about that? What if it is Kill Bill Volume 3, Ryan?
I gotta watch it. It's a
Yeah, of
Quentin
course.
Tarantino film. I'll be interested to see where they go with the Kill Bill series. I thought they did it all. Definitely the ending of Volume 2, I think, does sum up the story. But I'm game for it. I love Quentin Tarantino. Just because I didn't like Kill Bill Volume 1 or Kill Bill Volume 2 doesn't mean they are not good films. They may have not been my cup of tea. They still have redeeming factors. They're not 1, 2, 3, or 4. I mean, they're both above average for me. So I'm definitely game for that. That being said, if he went with the new original idea, I'd probably be a bigger fan, but I'm going to be excited no matter what.
I agree with you on that. If he goes with an original film, that's where he excels. I'd love to see his 10th and final film be a beautiful swan song for this excellent director. I hope we've said we couldn't cover possibly in a million years everything to say about Quentin Tarantino, but we are huge fans, and I think we've covered pretty much all of our opinions on it. Um, Other than that, Ryan, I think that's it for the top of the list. Do you have anything you want to close with saying? Maybe you want to give some plugs for yourself.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to make sure all our viewers out there, if you like, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and be sure to comment if you guys have any ideas, any questions for us, or any ideas that you'd like to see done, any new lists you'd like to see done. Please be sure to drop that in the comments. If you have any questions for me personally, you can find me on Instagram at rb_the_sid. So feel free to reach out to me. Dom, you go ahead, bud.
All right. Yeah. So, as Ryan said, like, comment, and subscribe. In the comments, I want you guys to go ahead and tell me what's at the top of the list for you. Is it Pulp Fiction? Is it Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Maybe it's Inglorious Bastards for you. Go ahead and let us know. Please, we're going to be reading those comments. We're going to be answering. We want to stay active. And please, please, please subscribe and like the video. As always, you can find me, Dominic Gonzalez, on Instagram at DomGonzalez48. DOMGONZALES 48. Okay, guys, see you next time.